Physicians and health experts across the state praising a new report on the dangers of alcohol. Noelle LeConte is an oncologist and associate professor of medicine with UW Health's Carbone Cancer Center. She says that she supports the U.S. Surgeon General's proposal to put warning labels on alcohol packaging to make people more aware of the risk.
Only about a third of people are even aware that alcohol is a carcinogen, and in some of the surveys people even think it may prevent cancer, which is absolutely not true. So we're happy to have the conversation elevated.
Experts say if you do plan to drink, alcohol consumption should be limited to 7 drinks a week for women and no more than 14 drinks a week for men. That number can also be reduced based on your family history and risk of cancer.